Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Georgia Bulldogs continue to build a special class in 2024, landing commitment from one of the best defensive linemen in the 2024 class, Jordan Thomas, the number one player from New Jersey, 6'6", 300-pound dude. And this is just, if you're a defensive lineman, you want to go to the NFL, you want to be a first-round draft pick, there's no other program to go to than the Georgia Bulldogs. And they continue to not only acquire top-notch talent, but depth on the defensive line. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. We jumped on, talked to little Chauncey Bowens over the weekend, and continuing to monitor this Georgia class as potentially being the best class we have ever seen. They are truly building something special, are in the running for a lot more top prospects. We'll talk a little bit more about those guys. But again, the Georgia Bulldog fans, you guys have been showing us a lot of love. We appreciate all the support you guys have shown. So if you do enjoy recruiting as much as I do, consider subscribing to the channel again. And we're going to try to keep you guys as updated as possible on some of these commitments. Appreciate you guys. Let's jump into Jordan Thomas. We'll talk a little Jordan Thomas first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what Georgia's doing on this defensive line, what makes him so special, and then just take a look at who else could be joining the class relatively soon. Jordan Thomas, we can just get right into his tape a little bit because it is – I'm not going to just start comping people to Jalen Carter. That would be wild. But in a very similar way that Jalen Carter was special because of that lateral movement, the explosiveness off the line was there for sure. But his ability to move laterally was something really special that a lot of NFL draft scouts coveted. You see that in Jordan Thomas's film as well. You see him kind of playing that. He's another guy that, 300 pounds, can play the three tech, can play maybe head up on tackles too. You can kind of move him around the defensive line, but lateral movement, beating a block, playing with good leverage, and just being like a game wrecker, if you will. A lot to like about this kid. You see him lining up on the edge right now, kind of that 5 technique. Phenomenal burst off the ball too. Power to go right through tackles. Again, the word that you would describe a guy like Jordan Thomas is game wrecker. Here he is playing on the inside again. Just massive power, taking on like 3 different blocks, getting to the quarterback. It's pretty obvious to see why pretty much every school in the country wanted a kid like Jordan Thomas. What I want to talk about a little bit more is the depth that Georgia has on the defensive line. I feel like everybody wants to talk about the stars, right? Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, are going back to Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis. They've had like top caliber guys who go in the first round. But what I think separated Georgia, especially the last couple of years in terms of how dominant their defense was how deep that defensive line was too. Like when you have a guy like Jordan Davis or in 2021, Jalen Carter was kind of being rotated in after Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. So you have arguably the best interior defensive lineman kind of in your 2 deep, if you will. That speaks to the depth they have on that defensive line. And when it gets down to it, these guys are 300-plus pound dudes. They need breaks. And when you have the ability to cycle in 2 to 3 waves of defensive linemen who are all NFL-level caliber players, that puts an extraordinary strain on a defense where you look around other programs, they might have first or NFL draft caliber guys on their first deep team, their starting group. But then when they have to cycle guys in, it might be a true freshman. It might be a walk-on. Georgia on the defensive line cycles in elite caliber players consistently. And I think that is, obviously it helps to have Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Devontae Wyatt, all those guys on the inside. But I think the unspoken truth to why Georgia's defense has been so dominant is the depth. When they have to rotate a guy like Jordan Davis out, it's filled in by a guy who is also an absolute stud. And Jordan Thomas just is going to add to that depth. Now, taking a look at the commitment, specifically just taking a look at the defensive line, I'm sure the Georgia fans who are checking this out know the talent of guys like Dylan Raiola, Alice Robinson. Specifically on the defensive line, Georgia has 2 guys that you're kind of really high on, Justin Green and Jordan Thomas. Justin Green being more of kind of a pure edge guy at 260 pounds. Jordan Thomas being more of a flexible guy that you can kind of move all along the defensive line. But I think what's a little bit more exciting is who they potentially could add to this group. And that is, it almost sounds disrespectful that I'm talking about Justin Green and Jordan Thomas as kind of like average guys. But when you get into who they had on campus last weekend, right? Edric Houston, a 5-star edge rusher from the state of Georgia, who it sounds like it's between Georgia and Ohio State. if they can land him, you're suddenly looking at just another freak show defensive line class in 2024. Jordan Ross, it sounds like they're making a lot of headway with him too. They obviously had Jordan Thomas on campus. It's getting to the point where if you're contacted by Kirby Smart, wherever you are in the country, or if it's Will Muschamp or Mike Bobo on the offensive side of the ball, Glenn Schumann, like you're going to come to visit Athens, like especially back-to-back national championships. You're going to get the attention of every single player in high school if you wanted to extend an offer. So that's why you see such a loaded visit sheet. Jordan Ross is a guy I would definitely keep my eye on. But you look at the guys who are coming in this weekend. Aiden Breland, who 24/7 has him as, not according to the composite, according to just 24/7 Sports, a top 10 player nationally in the country. He's coming all the way from Mater Dei to check out Georgia. You take a look more at defensive line prospects coming in. LJ McCray battling Florida, Florida State, Miami for his commitment. A very similar way that Ohio State has such pull for wide receivers. The ability to develop guys on the defensive line that Georgia has shown the last couple of years, that's going to start just gravitating guys to that program. So if you are an elite edge rusher, if you're an elite interior defensive lineman, and you're trying to figure out where to go to school, like Georgia is probably your dream school. If not, it's right at the top of the list because of their proven track record in developing guys. I mean, even a guy like Robert Beal goes in the NFL draft, and I don't think maybe when Nolan Smith got hurt, he wasn't a guy that necessarily was highlighting a group. And so the defensive line class right now, you only have two kind of premier commits. But if you get a guy like Aiden Breland into the fold, I know Justin Scott, I know Dylan Stewart, a top 10 national player, has also taken visits. That's when it starts to get special. And you look at some guys coming in the last week. Joseph Jonah is a guy that Oklahoma was supposed to get. Now it seems like we're trending, or the Georgia Bulldogs are trending for him. He's a top 50 national player. The talent that Georgia might be able to bring in just on the defensive line alone could be special. And then you go back to the 2024 class, and well, this is a little bit kind of taking a little bit of a pivot here, but we haven't really seen Georgia, as much as Georgia's dominated recruiting. Don't get me wrong. Georgia hasn't always dominated the offensive playmakers in terms of recruiting. You have Dylan Raiola as the number one player in the country. It sounds like you're trending in a really good direction for a guy like Ryan Wingo. You have Jaden Riddell, one of the best tight ends in the country. Nycar, one of the elite wide receivers. And even to a guy like Dwight Phillips Jr., who might be one of the fastest players in this 2024 class, or going down to a guy like Nitro Tuggle, who is, I think, going to be a high riser in this 2024 class. You're looking at Georgia continuing to recruit elite level guys on the defensive line, but also this offensive recruiting is starting to trend in the right direction once you get a guy like Dylan Raiola into the fold. Again, we're chasing down Texas A&M for that number one class ever, like not even in the country. I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. Georgia's going to have the number one class in 2024. We're looking at, can we break that record for Texas A&M? And it's hard to argue that the Georgia Bulldogs are not in a really, really good spot to do that as well. Again, another massive commitment for the Bulldogs, trending for plenty of more prospects. So again, if you do enjoy the content, you enjoy the updates and talking recruiting, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, you guys have been absolutely awesome. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.